So it all started with a purchase. I bought a Blue Ridge BR140A guitar. They said it was very similar to the Martin D18. Actually, it's not. I was disappointed. It had a crack bigger than I expected. It also arrived in a very dirty, neglected condition. I didn't like the sound as well, but I thought, I could use it for experimenting. The sound lacked bass and also lacked that Martin specific important key factor that I rarely hear from other brands: compression. I do hear some compression in a few guitars to some degree, mostly from the mighty ones, Taylors, Gibsons, and other high-end boutique brands. It is like a compressor. It makes the guitar more responsive to lighter touches while attenuating stronger strums, preventing the sound from breaking apart. I thought about this a lot and searched for answers. Why do some instruments have this effect? I couldn't find much. The usual explanations were like better wood, less glue, thinner top, better construction, scalloped braces, which didn't fully make sense because even some non-scalloped guitars have this compression. Still, I figured like, let's scallop the braces and see what happens. For some reason, I still thought that was the key. It turned out none of these factors probably matter, except maybe the thinner top. This guitar's compression didn't change in this experiment. Maybe the top thickness is indeed the real key, and I obviously didn't change that. Also, interestingly, since this experiment, I've bought a Lava Me 2 guitar, which has no wood in it, yet it has an extremely strong compression effect, just playing on it acoustically without any built-in effect. As experts say, almost all guitars are overbuilt. The cheaper ones even more so, especially those that are shipped overseas. Even Martins are overbuilt to avoid warranty issues, which is why some luthiers can still modify them, mostly by scalloping and shaving top and back braces. So that was my plan. I'm not an expert, not a luthier. All my knowledge comes from YouTube videos and forum discussions. I couldn't find any detailed guides showing the actual process, so I decided to document it myself. I studied a lot of photos to understand how well scalloped braces look in higher-end guitars. I know in that phase during the build, they tap tuning it, I tried it as well. Since this was my first luthier project, I made a lot of mistakes, which I hope will help others. They say smart people learn from others' mistakes. We'll see. So the first tool I tried was the finger plane. Unfortunately, whether because I bought a cheap version or because I wasn't able to sharpen it properly, or simply because its design wasn't comfortable for me to use in an already uncomfortable situation, it just didn't work well for me. The next most suitable tool on the list was the chisel. However, I encountered some issues with it as well, such as its overall length, including the handle, which made it difficult to use. Eventually, I removed the handle, which significantly improved both efficiency and comfort. I also struggled with sharpening it, though I got a hang of it by the end. Overall, it still wasn't the most ideal tool for me. Later on, however, the chisel did prove useful for reaching distant areas. The next idea was the snap-off utility knife, but I struggled with it as well. And then it was the surgical knife, but that was just not the right tool for me either. Sooner or later, I ended up using a simple ordinary knife or pocket knife, of which I had a few lying around, of course, and whose edge was also suitable. For some reason, this was the most comfortable to hold and it gave me the best control and feedback while carving. I made an important mistake that could be useful for others to know. The pointed tip of the knife left marks on the top in several places. Luckily, I noticed it in time before it became a bigger problem, but it looks ugly already. So I dulled the tip of the knife by covering it with adhesive tape. As I said, and as you see for the remote areas, the chisel remained the best. An interesting trick I discovered and used as I was placing the light inside the guitar so the camera could see inside, the light actually illuminated through the top. And when I positioned it directly under the work area, I could see from the outside exactly where I was working, allowing me to follow my process more precisely. I tried using a Dremel with an extension handle for sanding, but it wasn't a great experience. It was very uncomfortable to hold, and trying to work in tight spaces was a real struggle. Plus, it wasn't very effective at sanding, and the noise was pretty awful. I think a smaller, battery powered, higher quality one could have been good though. In some areas, it still worked quite well. As you see, the work I did on the braces was quite rudimentary, inexperienced, and admittedly rather terrifying to look at. I imagine luthiers are probably shaking their heads at this rough and heart wrenching sight. However, by the end, when the major irregularities, rough bumps, ridges, and grooves were smoothed out through sanding, the final results turned out to be surprisingly beautiful. So these are the back braces. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage before the shaving, so you can only see the end of the braces how it was next to the mirror. I also somehow forgot to record the shaving process itself, but I've got some approximate before and after pictures.